Insiders, welcome to another Monday download. First of all, I need to let you know that if you hear any noise in the background, my kids are home from school today, and so I apologize. I doubt it'll be that distracting, but thought I'd let you know so you didn't wonder what the noises were. Well, let's start out with a shout out today, and today's shout out is to Connie Fernandez. And Connie demonstrated some excellent negotiation skills last week that I wanted to make note of. We had a particular file that was approved with the approval in hand. Closing was scheduled for just like a week ahead of where at this point. And all of a sudden, as the closing agent was creating the last minute title updates and preparing the HUDs and getting everything ready to sign, a last second lien popped up against the sellers. And it happens periodically. Sometimes there's just nothing that can happen about that. Judgments and things are in the works, and people are trying to get liens or judgments against people all the time. And what happened is this just randomly popped up after we already had the approval. So the challenge is that we either had to go all back to the bank to get them to pay it and renegotiate that whole thing, which could have added weeks. We and the agents have to pay it out of our own fees and commissions, or we try to get them to release their lien on the property. Well, my shout out to Connie is because she got this lien, which was for a few $1,000s, so it wasn't gargantuan by any means. But still, a few $1,000s. She negotiated this down to zero so that we could get this closed, not have to go back to negotiation, and not have to get a bunch of commission and fees cut to satisfy this. So, way to go, Connie. Way to get in there and make it happen. And we're all proud of you for making that happen on the transaction. So, thank you for that. All right, well, let's talk about today. I have a couple of very common questions that when I talk with a seller that I hear them ask, and so I know you, when you're talking to your sellers, are hearing these questions as well, simply because it's one of the front of mind questions that a seller does have. And we went over this in module 1, the expert maker, but I know that it's good to refresh on some of these common things. So let's talk about the top 2 questions that I get when I'm talking to a seller. Should I stop making mortgage payments? Question number 2 follows closely on the heels of that. Do I have to be behind for the bank to consider a short sale? Both very legitimate and good questions. Rather than just answer those, let me bring in an interaction that I had with an actual seller in the last week and the questions that came up, some things that came up that these questions uncovered that threw up some red flags, and then how we dug in to find out that the short sale was still going to be able to work at the very beginning. And this is really important. If you don't ask the right questions and don't dig into your seller's information, you can waste a lot of time. And paying attention to small details, asking the right questions, and paying attention to their answers can help you uncover why a short sale won't work at the very beginning. And if it's not going to work, that is the best time to figure it out, because you're not wasting time and money marketing a property that's just going to go back to the bank anyway. So let's talk about it a little bit. The first question, as we're in conversation, she asked, so when should I stop making, or should I stop making payments to my mortgage? And this is a very interesting question because it's important to the seller, but you as the agent have to be very, very careful how you answer this question. You never want to tell someone to stop making their mortgage payments. That can create huge liability for you. You can get in some serious trouble for telling someone, advising someone professionally that they should stop making a payment on an obligation that they have. So here's how I answer it when we have that conversation. I actually tell them, I say, I can't actually tell you to stop making your mortgage payment. That's not my place, and I can get into some trouble for doing that. But what I tell my clients is that at some point you have to make a decision if making that mortgage payment is the best thing for your family. If you're having to choose between buying groceries this month and making a mortgage payment on a house that's upside down in its value, is that the right thing for you to do, to make the payment versus buy groceries? And so I always push it back onto them and let them know, you have to make the decision each month, what is the best for you and your family, and at what point are you going to not be able to make this payment anymore. Most of our clients, when they get to the end of their short sale process, have not been making their mortgage payment for some period of time. Some of them are shorter, others are longer. But again, what you've done is you've allowed them to say, okay, well, I know that it's not that if I can't make the mortgage payment, then I can stop. But at the same time, you're not advising them to. Well, that question for her was then followed by, well, then, can I not, what if I don't stop making my mortgage payments? Do I have to actually be behind in my mortgage for the bank to consider a short sale? And this question is an interesting one because, again, you have to be a little careful in how you answer this, because you can't say, oh, you have to be behind in your mortgage payment for the bank to consider a short sale, because in essence, that isn't true. Banks will look at short sales when you're not actually behind on your mortgage payment. The kicker here, and the most important thing, is what is your hardship? So it again leads you into a question back to your seller, and it has to do with your hardship. If you're making your mortgage payment, then you had better have a very clear and specific hardship that is easily detailed and proven, that even though you're making your mortgage payment now, you're not going to be able to make your mortgage payment after a certain point in the future. Let me give you an example. We had a client, it's been a couple years ago now, several years ago now, who was 30 days late on his mortgage when the property actually closed. So by the point that we had the approval letter, he was still current on his mortgage all the way through when we got the approval letter. Here was his reality though. His business had failed. He had a bunch of debt. He wasn't employed at that point at all. And the only reason he was making his mortgage payments is because he had money in savings and wanted to do that. It was very clear and defined because of his situation and the details that after a certain point, he was no longer going to be able to make those mortgage payments, and he could detail that in his hardship letter. The bank looked at that and they agreed, hey, this guy's going to be in some serious trouble. If we get cracking on this, we could actually get this thing closed as a short sale and not have a real, it's going to be a lower loss for the bank. So, but his hardship was well defined, and that's what you have to dig into for your sellers, is to dig into the hardship. Now, another interesting thing came out of this conversation I was having with this seller last week. As I said that, what is your hardship? I mean, is it, are you drastically red every month and then very easy for us to prove to the bank? And she said, well, actually, no, we're probably in the black a little bit every month in our living expenses. Immediately a red flag popped up, and it really should for you as well. If you hear that somebody is in the black, meaning that they have money left over every month after their expenses, and she said if we live conservatively, depending on how much we spend on entertainment and different things, we can be in the black. Well, that's a huge red flag. It's something that you really need to dig into. And so I did. I said, well, that's interesting. If you're able to exist paying your mortgage, and you're in the black every month, if you live a little more conservatively, it's going to be challenging for the bank to want to approve a short sale, because in their mind, they're going to say, well, if these people can afford their mortgage, then why are we going to take a loss on it? Well, as I dug in a little bit more, I realized that wasn't necessarily true. And the reason is, in conversation, she had mentioned that she's 2.5 years behind on her taxes. Okay, so you can't afford to pay your property taxes. So are you really in the black every month? And then she made a comment about her medical bills and said, actually some months we can't pay our medical bills. We try to do that whenever we have extra money that we can pay on those. So I asked her the question to clarify. So then if you paid all of your obligations, and that's potentially a good way to phrase it for your seller, if you paid all of your obligations, medical bills, property taxes, any payment that you should be paying, not necessarily the ones that you actually are paying, but the ones that you should be paying, are you still in the black every month? Her response was, oh no, we're drastically in the red at that point. So by being more specific, not only did we determine that this was going to be a good short sale property and seller, but we helped her on her financial sheet. She's not going to omit things like property taxes and medical bills just because she's not paying them. And that is another critical piece. When you get those financial sheets back, look at the bottom line. And if that's a plus number, you need to start asking some questions before you just send it off to the bank. Because the reality is that potentially is going to throw the short sale out completely, or cause your seller to have to bring money to closing, or there's all sorts of different variables. If someone can afford to make their payment, banks will still do short sales, but there are additional variables, notes or money at closing that they're going to want. So anyway, that is what I have for today. Have a great week. We're out of time. If you have any questions, send me some emails. I like to continue to dialogue with you and strategize on your transactions. So send me some emails and we will help you continue to get some short sales closed. Thanks a lot. Have a great one. Bye.